All right. Uh, all of you are required to stay calm and composed. Okay. Do not intervene in the class unnecessarily. Okay. If not compulsory completely, will not be speaking at all. So today we'll be discussing the Marxist approach uh, to study Indian politics and the nature of the Indian state. And if you look at the Marxist approach, of course, I gave you an introductory reading, uh, and that reading referred to a few things, if you remember. Number one of which, if you focused on the reading, was class analysis. And then also, while if you were sincere while doing the reading, you might have also been able to find words such as division of the class between the urban industrialist and the agrarian elite, as well as along with that the bureaucratic elite and the state elite, if you looked at the reading. So these are the terminologies that I'll be covering one by one. But of course, while looking at the class as a category, analytical category, when the writer is referring to the class analysis, what do we mean by class analysis? When we refer to class analysis, what is it? It refers to use and usage, operationalization of class as a conceptual category. Because if you look at the working class, for example, this the particular page that I have attached in this particular this is Raymond Williams. Raymond Williams wrote a book titled Keywords, in which he goes on to define keywords such as what is capitalism, who is a bourgeoisie, who is a proletariat, who is a lower middle class, who is a middle class, and who is upper middle class. No, so class becomes a determining category in the Marxist schema. And if you look at the Marxist literature, you will find that in the Marxist schema, there are only two classes. The one is the capitalist, and the other one is the working class, or the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. So when we look at the Indian state, operationalizing some of these categories such as class, what do we find? We are focusing on the class nature of Indian politics. That is, if we focus, discern some kind of class nature of Indian state, which in turn means that the Indian state and the institutions, they are controlled by a particular dominant class interest or a coalition of the same, isn't it? So this is what we look when we do Marxist analysis. So class refers to sometimes a group, social or economic category. All right, and then rank also in society. Some people, we refer to the culture, class culture, for example. So sometimes we use the word elite, for example, elite culture. And the word elite is very much prominent if you did the reading, although I did not introduce Pranab Bardhan directly to you guys, because Pranab Bardhan is very complex to understand right at the start. So I am just, unraveling some of the difficult vocabulary that he uses in the reading, so that you can go on to read one article by Pranab Bardhan. So rank here refers to the hierarchy of society, the organizational hierarchy of society, and then there are some people who control the culture and the reproduction of culture, and others who are marginalized and not in that very dominant position, and so on. It refers to the formation also. What is a formation? The word formation comes from the word form, which refers to the size or shape of something. Form, formation in society in terms of class refers to the organization of society in such a way that you can discern a particular form in society, particular pattern in society in which society is organized. So see, perceived economic relationship. For example, the land lord and the tenant, you know, refers to the formation. No, so obviously the keywords you focus and you see along with class, the cognate words are culture, industry, masses, ordinary, popular, society, and along with that underprivileged, subordinated. No, and what was the other word that I introduced in the previous lecture? Subaltern, isn't it? So you can add a few more words. Uh, so again, coming back to the material, class is a material concept. It's not an empty hollow concept. When you refer to the class, you are referring to the materiality of a particular formation, be it the underprivileged class or the bourgeoisie class, that is the one which controls the mode of production and the instruments of production. So materialism, where does this materialism in Marxist analysis comes from? Of course, we will be referring to Marx and again and again. Without Karl Marx, social science in the 21st century is almost inert. Even referring to the study of political theory, wherein state and power is one of the dominant categories that we study, some people say that the ultimate objective of political theory as a discipline is to study capitalism. How does it work? And the question, really important question, if it works for whom? To what end? Does it work for profit or for overall well-being? No. So why Karl Marx enjoys that prophetic presence in the social sciences? It is because of the post-enlightenment imbibing of humanism in the Karl Marx. Humanism par excellence comes out in the Karl Marx only. And of course, you will read Karl Marx as you grow. And not many people get the opportunity, and above all, the leisure. Please don't talk. You will be expelled from the class, by the way. If you disturb the class, you will be immediately dispatched from the class. So, if you look at Karl Marx, you will find that that materialism is dominant, class analysis is dominant, and humanism is dominant. And the broader goal of the emancipation of the working class is also dominant. How do we do that? The emancipation of the working class by emphasizing on the working class culture, the supremacy and the discipline of the working class culture. For example, we all know as we sit in the class here that those who control the tools and the machinery and the technology of production, they sit in the comfort of home, probably in a very air conditioned room and so on. And the working class, they work overtime for 16 hours. No? Who is more disciplined? The worker or the one who somehow, either through the sleight of hand or through, as Karl Marx calls it, fate, controls the means of production, and by that very virtue, that person gets to sit and do nothing, isn't it? So if you look at the moral side of the class as a category, you will find that it is a majority concept, captures most of the humanity. It is not a minority concept. That is why class as a concept is a powerful concept, powerful explanatory potential in class. It can sum up for you some of the most important facts to study any state, for example, and Indian state, of course, in particular. So I told you this particular quote by Epicurus that as far as the pleasure and the pain and the minimization of pain and maximization of pleasure is concerned, the hedonism and the happiness. So Epicurus, of course, was interpreted by Karl Marx. Karl Marx's materialism is based on Epicurus's study. Epicurus goes on to say that, of course, the well-being, you must have been taught in political theory that the ultimate purpose of the organization of any state is to make people's life better, the collective life better, no? So the same question is here. When you study Indian state, of course, you are trying to understand if in going to the history, if Indian state was successful in doing so, and if yes, how successful it was, and if no, why it was not successful, and what are the explanations for it. Uh, do we provide a class analysis to understand what is going on with the Indian state? No. So some of these things you will be studying, of course, in Pranab Bardhan. So this is the kind of approach that you will find in class analysis, wherein, of course, Epicurus is saying that uh, two slices of bread and a glass of water. That is what makes me happy. If you give me that, and I'll argue with anybody what is bliss, you know, because that will minimize my pain and increase my happiness, and then I'll be blissful. No, that is the starting point of Karl Marx, wherein, of course, within that paradigm, you must also understand that much of the political economy, either of the Indian state or of global political economy we study, we work around the concept of scarcity and the efficient allocation of resources, and also competition over the same among different and contending classes in the society. But that scarcity, how much valid the argument of scarcity is to be analyzed under this statement that, and also Gandhian approach you are going to study in the future. And Gandhi also said, quote unquote, that on earth we have enough for everybody's need, but not for the greed. Less or more reflecting the same kind of sentiment. Karl Marx coming up in that background, presuming already that if we will, and if we are really human, we will be able to provide for everybody in the society. And the barriers of class, for example, through which majority of the population is dispossessed of property, and their rightful honor to be blissful through material enjoyment. Two slices of bread and a glass of water, of course, might look very cheap to you, but not so in for many people around the world. 3 times a day, I'm referring to, isn't it? So it is under that background that we try to understand the Marxist class analysis of the Indian state. So today I'm focusing on the theory part only, Marxist theory, so that you can understand Pranab Bardhan's writing, which is very instructive, and it is thought to be a classical in its own right, classical treatise. If you did the article, I think written in 1983, 35 years after India became free, and goes on to focus on subsidy and so on, and uh, the effect that subsidy and the doling out of freebies to people, how it hampers the functioning of developmental state, the key concept. The developmental state, a concept emerged in 1980s under the aegis of the work going on by the World Bank and the IMF, funding of the development projects across Africa and in Asia, in Latin America, and so on. So this developmental discourse was going on, and when you find this quote unquote developmental state or developmentalism, or a state which is interventionist, refers to this particular one thing wherein state is an enabling factor in promoting economic growth and thus development, the traditional understanding of it. When we are talking about developmental state, quote unquote, we are referring to the state which intervenes in the society and in the economic organization of society in such a manner that it promotes economic growth. Economic growth is a quantitative concept, and in that very manner, it also promotes development. So, in the Marxist theory, basically the society is divided into two parts. Society is divided into two parts. The one is superstructure and the other is base. All right. This thing will become more and more clear to you as you go ahead into the course. Uh, uh, economy is the base here. And of course, in that particular pyramid of inequality, you are not able to infer what I am trying to tell you. But if you look around yourself, wherever you are, you will find that the whole culture industry, whatever you see in the city and so on, it is a manifestation of the economic organization. For example, the FM radio, the television, the advertisement, and the politician, they are just trying to confirm to the basic economic structure of society, which sometimes funds them, sometimes purchases them, and sometimes holds them captive under its own sway, the base, the economy. No, so what happens? You see the bourgeois educational institution, wherein you are not trained in the working class culture. You are made to feel that you are different from the working class culture on the road, and you are privileged, but the reality is not so. No, so the middle class culture, a concept, a very amorphous concept, not easy to define, but nonetheless your focus must be on to understand the working class culture. So you see culture, that is the songs, the drama, the music, and the theater and so on, reflects. For example, if you are doing the newspaper these days, you are seeing this Kiran Nadar Art of India gallery coming up, no? So who is Shiv Nadar, by the way, and Kiran Nadar? These are people who invest a lot of money in privatizing Indian education system, and the money that they earn, it should be somewhere, no, to legitimize their project. So they have art gallery and so on. So all of it is part of the superstructure. That is, economy reflects itself in different kind of paraphernalia, sometimes in neonic, bright, illuminating, brilliant advertisement, which keeps you in thrall, and you just go and buy the product, isn't it? So economy, the base in the sense that it creates its own logic of perpetuation, and it is a kind of virtuous cycle. The economy creates the superstructure, and the superstructure in turn legitimizes the same base, isn't it? So you see how difficult it is for an economic system to change, isn't it? It doesn't change much. It remains constant, because there is this virtual cyclical mechanism. They both legitimize each other. No, so the word culture was missing from 1848 to 1930s. Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxist, gave that concept, and the cultural passive revolution he was referring to. No, so passive revolution came in our reading also, and I did not explain it because in isolation you would not be able to make sense of it. So culture here, of course, working class culture we are referring to, quote unquote. In Antonio Gramsci you will find reference to working class education and working class culture, wherein the working class is to be trained to read, write, and criticize, isn't it? And that particular task is not easy to do, isn't it? If you look at the educational institutions, you will find that the middle classes have access to it, no? And a particular kind of curriculum is given to them. So the education and culture of the working class is the way forward here. This is also a theory of revolution. If you educate the working class and you acculture them, then probably the conflict between the haves and the have-nots will be understood conceptually, analytically, and it will lead to a kind of new practice among the working class, wherein they will try to resist suppression and exploitation, as well as alienation, and they might in that very process be able to build the counter hegemony, quote unquote, passive revolution through acquisition of superior cultural traits, such as courage to fight injustice and to valiantly criticize unphilosophical press, for example, the newspapers and so on, which legitimize the haves, the minority, and which are extremely wary because they get funded by these same people. Uh, uh, so uh, yes, a lot of examples. So, for example, when we study political science, especially when doing lectures, examples are everywhere. The very virtue that we are here, we are very political human beings. Examples uh, sometimes suffice to explain, but nonetheless they do not exhaust the possibility of further explanation. So examples are necessary, but nonetheless conceptual, theoretical clarity is what will make you understand what is the literature. Because literature is difficult if you were digging at it, no? Some of the words you might have found quite amusing sometimes, and at other times confusing also. So that one must think the Marxist schema theoretically approaching must be clear to you that economy is the base, creates its own superstructure in the government, in the family, creates religion, and it has its own education system, and thus it also creates its own culture. For example, despite the evidence that you might present to people and your friends of the inhuman operation, for example, of capitalism, you might not be able to convince them to understand what to think about working class emancipation, isn't it? Because of the indoctrination by the capitalist superstructure, that is the government and so on. So as we move ahead, of course, when you look at Pranab Bardhan, what Pranab Bardhan is telling? Pranab Bardhan is telling that since 1970s, class is not a very powerful analytical category. We have the rise of identity politics, for example, on the one hand, and ultra conservative nationalism on the other, which is taking the place of the class as a powerful analysis. When we refer to class, because you were referring to the example, we are referring to the trade unions. We are referring to the student union in the college. No? We are referring to a particular formation, the word came, which is conscious of its interest, and because it is conscious of its interest, it organizes itself, wants to progressively reproduce itself in more powerful and more emphatic form. So that must be clear to you. Of course, you will be trained into this particular thing, but I thought it very necessary that I actually tell you what this Marxist theory is all about. So this small slide, I think I need to zoom it in. So, as you see, uh, this is the pyramid of inequality, inverted or subverted, whatever you want to say. Because you did not see the background image, but if you look at the, where is the highlighter I will use to explain to you what is the structure of society in a capitalist society. So, a lot of people uh, under the domination of uh, so few people. For example, the working class in majority, and as you go ahead, working class, of course, you have to have a conceptual understanding of what I am referring to when I'm talking about working class. I'm talking about those who work on the wage labor. You need not to be very, confused and so on about who is working class. Working class is, we have a working definition of what working class is. So they are in majority. All right. And then we have middle class, no? middle class, sometimes we call it lower middle class, middle class, and upper middle class, but nonetheless, it's middle class. So it tapers off as you go ahead, and then you have them. They sustain the middle class, and in turn, and then the middle class provides legitimacy, ideological legitimacy to the capitalist, the one who controls the wealth as well as the society, the government, the culture, the education system, and so on. Hold on. I'll be taking questions. Keep the question handy and thoughtful, okay? So, you see that the working class sustains all of them, overburdened by them. And the greatest achievement in the previous 200 years, anywhere in the world, of course, we became free, India became free, not because of some kind of magic or, happenstance. It was the realization on our part that freedom is necessary to be human. Without freedom, you cannot be human. You will be slave or whatever you can call it. In the same manner, just imagine what our condition would have been when we were dominated by the colonialist, and what the condition of the working class around the globe is right now. How do they feel? So when you study the Indian state from the Marxist perspective, you are trying to understand the class bias in the Indian state. So Pranab Bardhan goes on to use a few terminologies, such as he says that what was the Trua, the Mélange de Trois, was something French word, cohabitation of the three, isn't it? So he says that in India we have actually three dominant classes, no? And their alliance sometimes gives results, but most of the times it leads to the problem of collective action dilemma, which I will explain to you what is collective action problem or dilemma. But what are those classes? First of all, we need to understand. So the urban industrialists, that is the one who invest in labor, purchasing labor power, and so on and so forth. They are the most dominant ones living in the cities and controlling the government directly, indirectly. And then you have landed agrarian elite who benefited because of the green revolution in the country, and who started engaging in export of agricultural commodities, and in that very process got this effective material base. In Marxism, yes, you have to always, sometimes he says that this agrarian elite is different from the earlier land-holding feudal elite in the sense that they are not the absentee landlords, those who were absent from the land and someone else used to cultivate their land. But these new landed agrarian elite is the result of the land reform in the country, wherein you have farmers who actually work on the land. So you have, this is the second class, and then you have the bureaucratic elite, which is civil servants and state clerks, grade A, B, C, and D, whatever you can call it. They work together, but it is very instructive for you to understand that because of the told you right at the start that politics doesn't happen in vacuum, and quoting Sudipto Kaviraj, I told you that politics is society is the mirror of politics. Whatever society is, the cleavages and the hierarchies and the whatever, it gets reflected in the state also. So for example, sometimes you have these civil servants working, but they are divided on the line of caste, creed, language, religion, ethnicity, and so on. So they cannot come together to be powerful group in negotiating their interest. So the fourth instrument, which was highlighted by Chatterjee, is the state elite. Who is a state elite, by the way, if you focused on that particular concept? because that is the most difficult to understand. State, obviously policymakers and agenda setters, what does it tell? Policymakers, we knew about the Planning Commission in India established in 1950. All those who worked under it, lump sum, apros, they can be termed as retrospectively as policymakers. No, the professors and the senior bureaucrats, the scholars, the literati who go on to formulate the public policy, write the public policy, they are called the state elite. And when the question of state autonomy came, relative autonomy of the state, that is where the concept gets sublimated. These people actually work for the state and they provide effective autonomy to the state, sometimes shielding the state through policy making in such a manner that neither contending bureaucratic elite, the three parties, no, they cannot actually engage in corruption and rent seeking and so on to actually vitiate the purpose of a developmental state. So the concept is developmental state, and the problem is collective action dilemma, and the reason for the problem is the conflicting interest and the deadlock. Sometimes what happens, you say that, okay, I have one mango, and all of you say that I need full of it, no? So because nobody is willing to give, so the mango remains the same and nothing happens, no? So this is what Pranab Bardhan says, that because these three elites, they cannot agree on what India wants to do, so India actually becomes a dysfunctional or underperforming democracy, or arrested development. The development is arrested, no? Goes on to talk like that. So I'll be giving one more reading by Pranab Bardhan, original reading by him, 20 pages for you to read. And the concept, of course, that these four words you will be repeating, they will be recurring. And our job today was to just have some kind of rudimentary understanding of how Pranab Bardhan approaches Indian politics, and how he uses the Marxist category of class analysis to make sense of the Indian state and Indian politics in general. So I was referring to collective action dilemma. It's a concept from game theory, all right. Of course, I'll be, if you are willing, be taking future lectures when relevant. I will be explaining to you all what game theory is. But rudimentarily, game theory and collective action dilemma is simple to understand to some, but difficult for others also equally. So game theory, of course, the word game is key here. So for example, if you take the example of a football match going on or a cricket match going on, all the players working together for the team. So what happens? The team does best only and only when everybody knows what other person wants to do, and everybody is actually maximizing their effort in the interest of the team, isn't it? Optimum choice. Game theory refers to the rational optimization of the most efficient choice, most optimal choice that you can have. The win-win situation. How to have a win-win situation under a framework wherein all the actors are supposed to be rational and aware of what that particular game, for example, means to them and for the team. So collective action dilemma comes from game theory and refers to a situation wherein, because you are not aware of the intention and of the interest of the other people, you are in a situation of dilemma and you cannot act in that position. So one example which might make the whole thing easy for you to understand is this the ruining or the destruction of global commons, for example, in the environmental discourse. So, for example, I am taking the example of a grazing land, for example, wherein people graze their animals. So, it's a common piece of land, and everybody knows that it's a common piece of land. So, everybody can go there, do whatever they want to do. So, what happens? Everybody thinks that even if I exploit or over-exploit that land, it won't make much impact because other people won't do it. No, but everybody thinks in the same manner, and what they do in turn, they destroy the whole thing. No, so it becomes a collective action problem. No, so you need to read more probably, and from my side, that's all for today's class. But you should be doing the reading, by the way.